So I have something here I want to talk about before we even get into the interview. This was breaking recently, and I think that you have some thoughts on this. There are now reports coming from Mexico, Peru, and other nations that are revealing how they have recovered the bodies of aliens. I actually went on Drudge Report. It's one of the featured stories this morning, and how there's going to be so many more to follow. They're boasting how this nullifies the Bible and turns Christianity on its head. And I think there's radical deception coming. But what are your thoughts on what's taking place in Mexico right now concerning these aliens? And before that, I want to share just the two articles as well. So one article says two alleged non-human alien corpses were unveiled during a public hearing in Mexico's Congress. Also, another one says, this is from Independent, alien corpses shown to Congress as UFO expert forced to testify under oath.
Well, I'm always cautious about anything that comes out of Mexico.
Yeah.
There's been too many hoaxes in the past. There's been, alleged creatures that have turned out to be composites of other kinds of animal life. And so these particular beings that they presented during their hearings in Mexico, I don't know what to make of them right now. I do have an interesting story in Peru, though. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I've for people who know me and my work, I've spent a lot of time in Peru. I lived there for a decade. I was working on a project in Peru a few years ago, and one of the archaeologists that were working on our team, he was a Spanish fellow who was doing archaeology in Peru, and he was associated with a French explorer. And it was this French explorer who originally discovered some of these mummies. I don't know if it's the same mummies that we've seen in these hearings in Mexico. So I think it is one of the ones that was featured on the Gaia TV, that documentary, if you guys remember that one, the three long fingers and
right.
That mummy. And I had assumed that those were fake because of the way that they were presented and because of the fact that the content went over to Gaia TV and not National Geographic or something like that.
Mm-hmm,
I had always assumed they were fake, and I was actually standing at the Chongos Pyramid in the desert of Paracas in Peru and talking to this archaeologist friend of mine, and he was discussing some of the projects he had worked on, and he made it explicitly clear to me that he did not want to talk about anything related to aliens. He did not want to, if we were going to talk about aliens or UFOs, he did not want to be involved. He didn't want his face to be on camera because he had some trouble in a previous project related to aliens. And I assured him that that current episode we were filming had nothing to do with aliens. And I inquired as to what the project was that he was working on. And he said that he was involved in that recovery, in that situation with those alleged alien bodies from Peru. And this was a very skeptical archaeologist. He doesn't really believe in any of the kind of stuff that I talk about. He's just a very straight edge archaeologist. And I was shocked to discover when I asked him if those bodies were fake, he said, actually, no.
Mm.
He said they were DNA tested by like a dozen labs. They were X-rayed by a bunch of different labs. He said they were absolutely shocked to find out that these things were real. And he began to tell me a bunch of stories related to the recovery and examination of these beings. They were mummified. Some were found in caves. These ones were in a mine in Peru, the ones that Jaime Maussan unveiled in Mexico. And they were preserved, mummified in the fashion that some of the natives were mummified in, the Nazca people and the Paracas people. Nazca and Paracas, it's in the region of Ica, and it's a very mysterious, it's near the region of Ica, Paracas, and then Nazca, that whole region there in Peru is very mysterious, very, very strange place. Believe me, I've spent a lot of time there. Intense desert, nothing decays out there. You can go into the desert over there and pick up cloth off the ground from the Paracas civilization, which we did, burial cloth that shirts and different kinds of mantles that are still intact after thousands of years. That's
Wow.
how arid it is in that desert. In fact, it never rains. It's one of the driest places on Earth. Interesting side note: when we were there, it actually poured one day, and it was a phenomenon that hadn't happened in decades, and it happened to rain while we were there, which was very strange. So it's the kind of environment that you would expect to find mummified creatures of all kinds. And but anyway, my archaeologist, the guy on our team, was very he was surprised. He was shocked at what they discovered with these mummies. He said that they were visited by members of the intelligence community. He said that he thinks that there was an attempt to poison him, and the other guy he was working with. He had this whole long, crazy story associated with these things. Ultimately, they ended up dumping them off to Gaia. They were going to do like this documentary and everything, and they were in discussion with all different TV networks and then I forget why, but it was just such a hassle, such a problem. They ended up just dumping it off to Gaia, and I think Jaime Maussan got his hands on them after a while. So, having said that, I don't know what to think about these things. As I said earlier, I'm very slow to believe anything like this coming out of Mexico or Central America in general and South America, because there's just too much tomfoolery happening in those countries in regard to these kinds of things. They get a lot of attention, and it's not as difficult as people might think to hoax these kinds of creatures. You can make composite, and we've seen this before, where there's allegedly fantastical creatures, fairies and little gnomes and things like this that end up being composites of various kinds of animals that are literally super glued together. So I think the jury's out with this thing. If it weren't Jaime Maussan, if it was a group of credentialed researchers who were bringing this forward, or government people in Mexico, I might be inclined to believe it a little bit more. So the jury's out. I don't know. That's my long-winded answer. I have no idea what to make of those bodies.